The name is Stephanie Grant. I'm 44 years old. At 5:36 on a Friday evening in June, my brother stood on my front porch holding a white envelope, looked past my shoulder like my house had embarrassed him, and said, "Dad doesn't need you making his retirement party awkward." The envelope was not sealed. That was how little effort they thought I deserved. Behind Mark, the sun was dropping behind the maple trees on Waverly Court, turning the sidewalk gold. His black SUV idled at the curb with his wife, Denise, in the passenger seat, pretending to scroll on her phone while watching everything through the side mirror. I had just come home from the hospital where our father, Harold Grant, had spent the afternoon completing a cognitive assessment after a minor stroke. My blouse still smelled faintly of antiseptic and cafeteria coffee. My feet hurt. In my purse was the small blue notebook Dad had asked me to bring him, the one with the elastic band and the coffee stain on the back cover. Mark held out the envelope. "What is this?" I asked. "The updated guest list." I looked inside. It was the invitation I had designed, except my name had been removed, so had my table assignment. So had the line that said, "Hosted with love by Harold's children, Stephanie, Mark, and Allison." Now it read, "Hosted with love by Mark and Allison Grant." I looked up. Mark sighed before I spoke, as if my breathing had already disappointed him. "Steph, don't make this into something." I said, "Dad asked me to help plan it. And we appreciate that." "No, you don't." His mouth tightened. "Allison and I talked. Denise agrees. Mom would have agreed too if she were still here. You have a way of bringing tension into rooms. You ask questions. You correct people. You make Dad look confused when you hover over him." I stood very still. Our father had trusted me with his medication schedule, his legal folders, his home repairs, his late-night fear after the stroke, and the password to the investment account he had spent 41 years building. But my siblings had decided I embarrassed the family. Mark lowered his voice. "We just want one nice night where Dad looks successful, where the family looks normal." Normal. That word had done more damage in our house than anger ever had. I looked at the invitation again. What did Dad say? Mark's eyes moved to the porch light. He doesn't need to be bothered with every detail. That was my answer. I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not chase him down the walkway when he turned to leave. I folded the invitation once, placed it back in the envelope, and said, "Then I hope you have everything you need." Mark looked relieved. What they didn't know was that the next morning, their caterer, the country club, the retirement gift, and the family trust distribution were all waiting on one financial authorization. Mine. Because 6 months earlier, Dad had looked me in the eye across his kitchen table and said, "Stephanie, if something happens and they start circling, you are the only one I trust to know the code." This is that story. Before I tell you how a retirement party full of bankers, cousins, old coworkers, and polished liars went silent over one missing signature, tell me where you are watching or listening from, and what time it is there. I always wonder who hears these stories after years of being told they were the difficult one for remembering facts. And if you connect with stories about women who were betrayed, underestimated, excluded, and quietly took their power back, like and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Some women do not need revenge speeches. Some women have the notebook. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a split-level house on Marigold Lane with green shutters, a basketball hoop above the garage, and a kitchen table made of oak so heavy it took 4 men to move it. When my parents bought new flooring in 1998, that table was where everything important happened. Bills were paid there. Birthday cakes were cut there. Report cards were signed there. My mother cried there when her sister died. My father sat there every Sunday morning with coffee, a calculator, a legal pad, and the small blue notebook where he wrote down things he said mattered too much to trust to memory. Dad was an engineer at Bellman Manufacturing for 41 years. He began as a floor technician and retired as the plant operations director, though he still kept a pencil behind his ear, like someone might ask him to fix a conveyor belt during Thanksgiving dinner. He was not sentimental in the obvious way. He did not give long speeches or say "I love you" easily, but he rotated tires without being asked. He mailed birthday cards early. He kept every receipt in envelopes labeled by year. And every December, he bought my mother one ornament shaped like something that had happened that year. A house for the year they paid off the mortgage, a tiny suitcase for the year they took their first cruise, a silver bird for the year she finished chemotherapy. My mother, Elaine, died 3 years before the retirement party, after a second cancer diagnosis that arrived too quietly and moved too fast. I was the one who took her to treatments because Mark was swamped at the office, and Allison said hospitals made her panic. I do not say that to sound noble. I say it because the truth has a calendar, and I still have the appointment cards. Mark was the oldest, 48, a commercial real estate broker who wore navy blazers and spoke in confident half-sentences. He had our father's jaw and our mother's charm, but neither of their humility. He was the golden son because he looked successful from a distance, and because people loved to believe confidence was evidence. Allison was 46, 2 years older than me, a lifestyle photographer with a soft voice she used mostly when asking other people for things. She had a husband named Joel, 3 children, and a talent for turning inconvenience into injury. If Allison forgot to visit Dad, she was overwhelmed. If she missed Mom's oncology appointment, she was sensitive. If she left me with the hard work, she called later and said, "I don't know how you stay so strong." I was the youngest, Stephanie, the practical one, the nurse, though technically I was a respiratory therapist at Kettering Memorial Hospital. In my family, any woman who wore scrubs became the nurse, just as any woman who could handle paperwork became the secretary, and any woman who set boundaries became cold. My role had been set early. I remembered things. I knew Dad's blood pressure medications. I knew Mom's chemo schedule. I knew which insurance cards were current. I knew the garage keypad, the safe combination, the name of Dad's estate attorney, the warranty company for the furnace, and which neighbor had a spare key when Dad locked himself out during the snowstorm. And because I knew things, my family accused me of controlling them. The symbolic object through all of this was Dad's blue notebook. It was small enough to fit in his shirt pocket, though after Mom died he kept it on the kitchen table beside the salt shaker. The cover was navy canvas, the corners softened from use, and the elastic band had stretched slightly. Inside, in Dad's neat block handwriting, were lists: account names, utility numbers, plant contacts, medication changes, reminders, and sometimes little notes he pretended were practical but were really love. Buy Steph new snow shovel. Hers cracked. Elaine likes the peach tea from Miller's. Ask Mark about his back, but don't push. Allison's Sophie likes purple now. After Mom died, Dad added one line near the back. If I get foggy, call Stephanie first. I found it by accident while helping him sort bills, and when I read it, he took the notebook from my hand, embarrassed. Don't make a thing of it, he said. I won't. You make things a thing. I make medical emergencies a thing. He almost smiled. That's what I mean. The first time my siblings called me embarrassing was at Mom's funeral lunch. We were in the church hall, standing near the long folding table covered with casseroles and fruit trays. Dad looked gray with grief, his tie crooked, his coffee untouched. Aunt Patricia asked whether he had eaten. Mark said, "He's fine, let him breathe." I looked at Dad, his hands were shaking. I said, "Dad, when was your last blood pressure pill?" Mark gave me that smile he used in front of other people. "Steph, not now." Dad said, "I'm not sure." I took him to a side room, checked his pill case, and realized he had missed both morning medications. I gave him water. I sat with him for 10 minutes while the noise of the church hall rolled on outside the door. Later, Mark said, "You made him look helpless." I said he needed his medication. He needed dignity. I remember looking at my brother and realizing he thought dignity meant hiding need from witnesses. The second time happened during Dad's 72nd birthday dinner. Allison had ordered a cake that said, "Happy 73, Dad," in blue icing. When the waiter placed it down, Dad blinked, then laughed softly. Allison said, "Oh no, did I get it wrong?" Before I could stop myself, I said, "He's 72. The table froze. Allison's eyes filled instantly. "I'm sorry I'm not perfect like Stephanie." I said, "I just meant—" Mark cut me off. "You could have let it go." Dad looked at the cake and said, 73 sounds ambitious." Everyone laughed. But Allison did not speak to me for 3 weeks. The third time was after Dad's stroke. It happened in January, at 7:05 in the morning. He called me because his right hand felt numb, and his words sounded thick. I was at work, finishing a night shift. I told him to hang up and call 911. Then I called the neighbor and drove straight to the hospital. Mark arrived 2 hours later wearing a suit and irritation. Allison came after lunch with a large scarf and wet eyes. When the neurologist explained that Dad had experienced a minor ischemic stroke and would need follow-up monitoring, medication changes, and help with certain tasks for a while, Mark nodded like he was chairing a meeting. "We'll handle it as a family," he said. Then he looked at me. "Without anyone taking over." I did not answer because Dad was watching. The next 6 months proved exactly who family meant. I drove Dad to neurology appointments. I organized physical therapy. I installed grab bars in the downstairs bathroom. I removed the loose rug in the hallway after he tripped over it. I set up automatic medication refills. I color-coded folders for taxes, insurance, estate documents, and banking. Mark visited on Sundays if the Bengals were not playing. Allison brought muffins twice and posted about cherishing every moment with Dad. Meanwhile, Dad became quieter. Not confused exactly. Not incapable. Just newly aware that his body had betrayed him once and might do it again without asking. He began calling me in the evenings. "Steph," he would say, "what day is the MRI?" "Thursday." "What time?" 10:15 in the morning. "Do I need to fast?" "No." "Good. I hate fasting." "I know." Then silence. Then softer, "You all right?" That was Dad. He could be the one recovering from a stroke and still ask if I had eaten dinner. In March, he told me he was officially retiring. "I should have done it when your mother was still here," he said, looking out the kitchen window at the bare backyard. "She knew you were proud of your work." I was proud of providing. That's not the same as knowing when to stop. He asked me to help plan the retirement party. "Not too fancy," he said. "Dad, Mark will make it fancy. Then you make sure there's decent coffee." I smiled. We chose the Meadowbrook Country Club because Bellman Manufacturing used it for annual banquets, and Dad knew the staff. We booked the Oak Room for June 24th at 6:30 in the evening. I made the guest list with him at the kitchen table. Former coworkers, neighbors, cousins, Mom's sister, his bowling friend, Dawn, the plant manager, who still called Dad every month for advice. Mark and Allison wanted clients and country club acquaintances invited too, but Dad crossed out most of those names. "This is not a networking event," he said. Mark did not like that. I ordered navy and silver invitations because Dad hated gold. I arranged framed photographs from his years at the plant. I found an old Bellman Manufacturing blueprint and had it enlarged for guests to sign. I chose lemon chicken, roast beef, green beans almondine, roasted potatoes, and chocolate cake with coffee buttercream because Dad said vanilla cake tasted like a missed opportunity. For the retirement gift, Dad wanted nothing. Mark wanted a $9,000 engraved watch. Allison wanted a video montage with drone footage. I suggested restoring Dad's old workbench in the garage, the one Mom had once threatened to throw out because he kept every bent nail and extra screw. Dad's eyes lit up when I mentioned it. Mark said, "That's not a public gift." I said, "It's Dad's gift." He said, "You always miss the point." No, I thought, I just know whose party it is. The financial account became relevant because of the party, but it began long before. Dad had accumulated more money than any of us realized. Not because he was flashy, because he was consistent. Bellman stock, retirement accounts, a life insurance payout from Mom, conservative investments, a small stake in a manufacturing patent that continued paying royalties. By the spring after his stroke, Dad's main managed account held just over $3 million. He did not tell Mark, he did not tell Allison. He told me. It happened on April 9th at 8:20 in the evening. I had come over after work to check his pill organizer. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table with the blue notebook, his reading glasses low on his nose. "Close the door," he said. I closed the back door. The patio door, too. I did. He pushed a folder toward me. Inside were banking documents from Riverstone Private Wealth. "Dad, listen first." I sat down. He tapped the folder with one finger. "Your brother has asked me 3 times about consolidating accounts with one of his clients." I felt my stomach tighten. "Mark wants to manage your money? He says his guy can do better." "What did you say?" I said I like boring money. I almost smiled. Dad did not. Allison asked if I would consider helping Sophie with college early. Then she mentioned Joel's business loan in the same conversation. I closed my eyes briefly. She did not. She did. He opened the blue notebook to a page near the back. There was a string of words and numbers written in his block lettering, but separated into phrases only he would understand. "This is the verbal passcode for Riverstone," he said. "There is also a dual authorization requirement for any transfer over $50,000 until my doctor clears me fully. I added you as trusted contact and required cosigner for large distributions." I stared at him. "Dad, why?" "Because if I get foggy, Mark will sound certain, and Allison will sound hurt. You will sound annoying." I looked up. He met my eyes. "And annoying is what I need." My throat tightened. "I don't want control of your money." "I know. That is why you have access." He tore the page from the notebook and folded it once. "No," I said, "don't tear it. It's my notebook." "That is chaos." He handed me the page. "The code will not work without my voice confirmation or legal documentation while I'm alive. But if I am hospitalized or impaired, Riverstone will require your signature for emergency movement above the threshold." "Does Mark know?" "No." "Allison?" "No." "They're going to be furious." Dad looked toward the dark dining room, where Mom's framed photograph sat on the sideboard. "They have been furious at you for less." I kept the page in a fireproof lockbox at my townhouse. I did not tell anyone. The breaking point came during the week before the party. Dad had another episode on June 19th. Not a stroke this time, thank God. A blood pressure drop, dehydration, and medication interaction that caused confusion for several hours. I found him sitting in his recliner at 2:10 in the afternoon, trying to use the television remote as a phone. At the emergency department, he stabilized. The doctor recommended observation and a follow-up cognitive assessment. Dad was embarrassed. He kept saying, "I lost the thread for a minute." I said, "You got it back." He gripped my hand. "Do not let them make me a decoration at that party." "I won't." The assessment happened on June 23rd, one day before the retirement party. Dad did well enough to go home, but the neurologist advised against stress, alcohol, long speeches, and financial decision-making until the follow-up appointment in July. I texted Mark and Allison with the update. Mark replied, "Does this affect tomorrow?" I stared at the screen. Not, "How is Dad?" Not, "Is he scared?" Just, "Does this affect tomorrow?" I wrote, "He can attend if we keep it calm and short." Allison responded, "This party is important for his morale." Then Mark came to my porch with the envelope. He said I embarrassed the family. He said I made Dad look confused. He said they wanted one nice night where the family looked normal. I stood there with my hospital bracelet still in my purse because Dad had asked me to hold his discharge paperwork, and I understood something I should have understood years earlier. They did not want Dad protected. They wanted Dad presented. And they did not want me there because I knew the difference. After Mark left, I went inside, placed the uninvitation on my kitchen counter, and made tea I did not drink. My townhouse was quiet. The clock above the stove ticked too loudly. On the counter beside the envelope sat Dad's blue notebook. He had handed it to me at the hospital and said, "Take this home. Too many people in and out of my room." I opened it. Near the front, under the party guest list, Dad had written one line, "Make sure Stephanie sits next to me. She knows when I'm tired." I sat down slowly. That was the sentence that hurt more than Mark's porch speech. Because Dad had planned for me to protect him, while they planned for me to disappear. At 9:14 that night, Riverstone Private Wealth called. The caller ID showed the firm's number because I had saved it after Dad added me as trusted contact. "This is Stephanie Grant." "Ms. Grant, this is Marla Jenkins from Riverstone. I apologize for calling late, but we received multiple transfer authorization attempts today connected to Harold Grant's managed account." I stood up. "What kind of attempts?" "Mr. Mark Grant contacted us regarding a distribution for an event payment and a family gift arrangement. He indicated the matter was time-sensitive and related to Mr. Grant's retirement celebration." I closed my eyes. "How much?" The first request was $62,000. The second was for $310,000 to be transferred into a holding account pending family allocation. My kitchen seemed to narrow. Family allocation? That was the phrase used. Did Dad authorize this? We could not complete verification. Mr. Grant sounded uncertain during the call, and given the account safeguards, we require either his full confirmation under capacity or your co-authorization with documentation. Did Mark know I was required? There was a careful pause. He was informed additional authorization was needed. I almost heard him learning my name inside the machine he thought he could operate without me. I said, "Do not authorize any transfer." We have not. I want an immediate freeze on large external transfers until Dad's July clearance, or until I sign in person. We can place a temporary protective hold. Do it. By 9:28, my phone began buzzing. Mark, Allison, Mark again, Denise, Allison. A text from Mark came through. Call me. Dad's account is locked because of you. I looked at the uninvitation on my counter. Then I turned my phone face down. I did not call him. I called Dad. He answered on the fourth ring. Steph? Did Mark ask you to move money today? Silence. Then, he said the party balance needed covering. How much did he tell you? Something about deposits. I got tired. Did he mention $310,000? Dad said nothing. That silence was not confusion, it was sorrow. Finally, he said, "Come over in the morning." I will. And Steph? Yes? Bring the notebook. I slept badly, but I did sleep. That surprised me. There is a kind of calm that arrives after betrayal stops being confusing. Once people show you exactly who they are, your body stops wasting energy interpreting shadows. By 7:45 the next morning, I was at Dad's kitchen table with coffee, the blue notebook, and a folder of documents. Dad looked pale but sharp-eyed. His right hand trembled slightly around his mug. I want to see the requests, he said. I called Marla Jenkins on speakerphone. She confirmed the attempted transfers, the amounts, and the protective hold. She also confirmed that any distribution above $50,000 required my in-person co-signature under the account safeguard terms until Dad's physician provided updated clearance. Dad listened without interrupting. When Marla finished, he said, "Mark told me the watch and party expenses were around $20,000. I looked down. Dad! He lifted one hand. I know. Marla said, "Mr. Grant, there is also a pending invoice request from Meadowbrook Country Club. The event card on file declined because your son attempted to change the funding source yesterday. The club contacted our office after receiving Riverstone account information from him." Dad's face hardened. My son gave the country club my account information? Yes, sir. Partial information, not sufficient for access. Dad looked at the blue notebook. For a moment, he looked older than 74. Then he said, "Stephanie, write this down." I picked up a pen. At 12:30 today, I want Mark, Allison, Denise, Joel, and you at Riverstone. If they want my money so badly, we'll discuss it where money lives. I wrote it exactly. At 8:10, Mark called Dad. Dad answered on speaker. "Dad, thank God. Stephanie has created a disaster." Dad looked at me. I stayed silent. Mark continued. "The club needs payment today. The gift vendor is holding the watch, and Riverstone is acting like I'm committing fraud because Stephanie put herself in the middle." Dad said, "You put her there when you needed her signature." Mark stopped. "Dad, this is not something you need to worry about." That sentence worries me. Stephanie is making you paranoid. Dad's hand closed over the notebook. "Be at Riverstone at 12:30. Why? Because I'm retiring, not dead. Then he hung up. I looked at him. His mouth twitched. Your mother would have liked that line. She would have embroidered it on a pillow. He laughed once, then grew serious. Are you all right? I thought about the porch, the envelope, the missing name. No, I said, but I'm clear. At noon, I helped Dad dress in a gray suit and blue tie. He insisted on wearing the tie Mom had bought him for their 40th anniversary. I drove him to Riverstone Private Wealth, a glass building downtown with marble floors, quiet elevators, and people who spoke in careful financial voices. The public payoff began in Conference Room 3, where a long table held water glasses, legal pads, and a speakerphone. Present were Dad, me, Mark, Denise, Allison, Joel, Marla Jenkins from Riverstone, a senior account manager named Victor Hale, Dad's estate attorney Elaine Porter, and later, because Dad requested it, the Meadowbrook Country Club events director, who joined by video call. Mark arrived angry, Allison arrived hurt. Denise arrived with a leather tote and a face like she had already drafted statements. Joel arrived, looking confused, which was usual. Dad sat at the head of the table. I sat to his right. Mark noticed. His eyes flicked toward the chair, then away. Victor began. Mr. Grant, we are here to review attempted account activity from yesterday and clarify authorization protocols. Mark leaned forward. I think we should start by acknowledging that my sister has caused unnecessary alarm. Dad said, no. One word. The table stilled. Mark blinked. Dad looked at Victor. Continue. Victor placed a document in front of Dad. Yesterday, there were 2 attempted distribution requests. One for $62,000, described as event and gift expenses. Another for $310,000, described as family allocation planning. Allison's head turned toward Mark. What allocation planning? Mark said, it was preliminary. Dad looked at him. Preliminary to what? Mark adjusted his cuff. Dad, we've discussed how complicated things could become if your accounts aren't simplified. I was trying to make things easier. For whom? Dad asked. Mark's face tightened. Everyone. Marla slid another page forward. This is the Meadowbrook invoice currently pending. The total remaining balance for the retirement event is $18,740. Dad looked at Mark. Where did $62,000 come from? Denise spoke quickly. The watch was part of it. Dad turned his head. What watch? Mark exhaled. The engraved retirement watch. It was meant to be a surprise from the family. How much? Mark did not answer. Denise said, $9,400, with engraving and rush delivery. Dad stared at them. I asked for my workbench. Allison said softly, we thought a watch would look better at the party. Dad's jaw tightened. There it is. The room went quiet. I saw Mark's frustration turn sharper. Dad, this is exactly why Stephanie shouldn't be involved. She keeps making this emotional. Dad opened the blue notebook. The sound of the elastic band snapping softly against the cover seemed to settle every person in the room. He turned to the party page. Stephanie, he said, read the note. I did not want to, but he asked, so I read it. Make sure Stephanie sits next to me. She knows when I'm tired. Allison looked down. Mark looked at the window. Dad said, my daughter was removed from my retirement party guest list yesterday. Victor Hale looked up. Marla stopped writing. Elaine Porter, the estate attorney, folded her hands. Dad continued. I did not approve that. I did not know that. I did not ask for that. The person I trusted to help me through the evening was uninvited from a party supposedly honoring me. Mark said, Dad, we were trying to protect you. Dad looked at him. From Stephanie? Mark swallowed. She overwhelms you. No, Dad said. She tells the truth while you're still arranging the lighting. I felt something in my chest loosen and ache at the same time. Dad turned to Victor. Explain the safeguard. Victor nodded. After Mr. Grant's January medical event, he added a protective measure requiring trusted contact review and co-authorization from Stephanie Grant for large transfers while capacity monitoring remains active. Allison whispered, You gave Stephanie control? Dad looked at her. I gave Stephanie responsibility. There's a difference. Mark laughed once. This is absurd. She manipulated you. Dad's hand struck the table. Not hard. Hard enough. Every glass trembled. I am tired of hearing that the only child who shows up must have tricked me into noticing. No one spoke. Dad's breathing was slightly uneven. I reached for his water, opened it, and placed it near his hand. He took it without looking away from Mark. Elaine Porter opened her folder. Harold, would you like me to clarify your estate documents as well? Mark's face changed. Estate documents? Dad nodded. Elaine removed several pages and placed them neatly in front of her. Mr. Grant updated his estate plan in April. Stephanie Grant is named Durable Power of Attorney for financial matters if Mr. Grant is incapacitated. She is also Medical Power of Attorney. Mark Grant and Allison Grant remain beneficiaries under the trust, but neither has unilateral authority over account distributions. Allison's eyes filled. "Dad, why wouldn't you tell us?" Dad's voice softened but did not weaken. "Because every conversation about my health turned into a conversation about your feelings." She flinched. He looked at Mark. "And every conversation about my money turned into your plans." Mark stood halfway. "This is insulting." Dad looked up at him. "No, insulting is uninviting my daughter from my retirement party and then needing her signature by breakfast." That was the sentence, the one that emptied the room of excuses. Mark sat down. Denise whispered something to him. He shook his head. Victor turned a page. "There is also the matter of the $310,000 request. Mr. Grant, do you authorize any family allocation transfer today?" "No." "Do you authorize the $62,000 event-related transfer?" "No." Mark said, "Then how is the party getting paid?" Dad looked at me. "Stephanie, what is the actual amount needed for the party I approved?" I opened my folder. Meadowbrook balance, $18, $740. Workbench restoration, $2, $850. Photo display printing, $620. Cake balance, $340. Total, $22, $550. Dad nodded. "Riverstone may pay those vendors directly. Nothing to Mark, nothing to Allison, nothing to Denise, nothing to Joel." Victor wrote it down. Dad then turned to the video screen, where the Meadowbrook events director had joined, a woman named Carla Finch, wearing a headset and a professional smile that was beginning to crack. "Ms. Finch," Dad said, "is Stephanie Grant listed as an authorized event contact?" Carla glanced down. She was originally yes. She was removed yesterday by Mark Grant. "Put her back," Dad said. Mark closed his eyes. "And send the final seating chart to her." Dad continued, "My daughter sits next to me." Carla nodded. "Of course, Mr. Grant." Dad looked at Mark and Allison. "You can attend tonight as my children, not as hosts, not as managers, not as gatekeepers." Allison began crying. "I never meant to hurt you." Dad's face softened with sadness, not surrender. "I believe you. That's why it kept happening." I looked at her then, and for once, she did not look away. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever been called difficult because you were the one keeping track of medications, bills, appointments, documents, and the truth, then you know exactly what that conference room felt like. It was not about money. It was about years of invisible labor being treated like interference until everyone suddenly needed the person they excluded. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment and tell me what moment made you stop apologizing for being responsible. And if you have not already, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. The quiet part is over. The retirement party happened that night at Meadowbrook Country Club. For a few hours, I considered not going. Not because I was afraid, because I was tired. There is a special exhaustion that comes from being vindicated. People imagine it feels like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like finally setting down a box you have carried for years and realizing your arms are numb. At 4:15, Dad called. "Steph." "Yes?" "You still have that blue dress? The one Mom liked?" "Yes." "I do. Wear it." So I did. The Oak Room at Meadowbrook had tall windows overlooking the golf course, round tables with navy linens, silver centerpieces, and framed photographs of Dad arranged near the entrance. I had placed the enlarged Bellman blueprint on an easel with silver pens nearby. Former co-workers had already started signing it when I arrived. Carla Finch met me at the door. "Ms. Grant," she said warmly, "I have the updated seating chart." I looked at it. Table 1, Harold Grant, Stephanie Grant, Donald Reeves, Patricia Miller, Victor Hale, Elaine Porter. Mark and Allison had been moved to the same table but not beside Dad. It was not petty, it was accurate. At 6:28, Dad entered on Mark's arm because Mark had arrived early and positioned himself near the door. But when Dad saw me, he released Mark, crossed the room carefully, and held out his hand. "There you are," he said, in front of everyone. 200 small humiliations do not disappear because of one public sentence. But they do get answered. I took his hand. Here I am. Mark watched from near the bar. Allison stood beside him, holding a champagne flute she had not touched. The evening began gently. Dad's coworkers told stories about him climbing inside machinery in a white dress shirt, about him remembering every employee's kid's name, about him refusing a promotion once because it would have required moving my mother away from her oncologist. Don Reeves, his old bowling friend, said Dad was the only man he knew who could fix a motor and a marriage argument with the same expression. People laughed. Dad laughed too. Real laughter. Tired, but real. At 7:40, the video montage played. Allison had made it, and to her credit, it was beautiful. Photos of Dad at the plant. Dad with Mom. Dad holding each of us as babies. Dad standing beside a fishing boat he never learned to operate properly. Dad and me in the hospital hallway after Mom's last treatment, both of us giving thumbs up for her camera even though we had been crying 10 minutes earlier. When that photo appeared, Allison glanced at me. I did not look away. After the montage, Mark stood with a microphone. My stomach tightened. Dad's hand moved slightly on the table. I leaned toward him. You okay? He nodded. Mark cleared his throat. I had planned to present Dad with something tonight, he began, but plans changed. A small ripple moved through the room. Mark looked down at his notes, then folded them. For years, I thought taking charge meant making things look right. My sister Stephanie has always cared less about how things look, and more about what is actually needed. The room became very still. I used to think that was embarrassing, he said. Today I learned it was expensive not to listen to her. A few people laughed softly, not quite knowing whether they were allowed to. Mark looked at me. I owe her an apology. Not a public performance. A real one. But since I embarrassed her publicly by removing her from this evening, I should at least say publicly that it was wrong. I did not move. Allison began crying again, but quietly this time. Mark turned to Dad. And Dad, I'm sorry I turned your retirement into something I wanted to manage instead of something you wanted to feel. Dad watched him. No one clapped. That was appropriate. Apologies are not performances, even when they happen in public. Mark placed the microphone down and sat. Dad leaned toward me and whispered, Your mother would have fainted. I whispered, then criticized the microphone placement. Dad smiled. At 8:05, the restored workbench was revealed through a slideshow of photographs because we could not move the actual thing into the country club. The final image showed it in Dad's garage, sanded, sealed, organized, and fitted with a new light. His old tools hung in their places. Mom's little silver bird ornament sat on the top shelf because I had put it there that afternoon. Dad pressed his lips together. His eyes filled. He did not cry. Grants rarely cried in public unless someone hit a thumb with a hammer. But he held my hand under the table. That was enough. After dinner, cousins came up to me with careful smiles. I didn't realize you had done so much, Aunt Patricia said. I know. She blinked at the answer. I did not soften it. Denise approached me near the coffee station. Stephanie, she said, Mark was under a lot of stress. I poured coffee into Dad's cup. Then he should not have tried to move $310,000. Her face went pale. I didn't know the amount. I believe you. That was not forgiveness. It was simply the truth. Allison came last. She waited until I was placing Dad's signed blueprint into a protective sleeve. I'm sorry, she said. I kept sliding the paper carefully. For which part? She swallowed. For letting Mark remove you. For agreeing. For saying you made things tense. For letting you do the hard parts and then acting like you were hard to be around because you knew more than I did. I looked at her. That was the first real apology she had ever offered me. Not perfect, but named. Thank you, I said. She nodded. Can I help with Dad's appointments next month? The old me would have said yes immediately, because any crumb of help felt like proof I was not alone. The new me said, I'll send you the calendar. Pick 2 you can actually attend. She accepted that. Growth, I had learned, often looks like not over-rewarding late effort. The aftermath unfolded in paperwork, as most real consequences do. Riverstone removed Mark's ability to initiate any informal requests. Dad kept the protective hold in place until his follow-up evaluation, and even after he improved, he chose to maintain the co-authorization safeguard for large transfers. "I like boring money," he told Victor Hale. Victor smiled. "Boring money tends to survive." Dad also revised the party reimbursement records to make everything clean. Meadowbrook was paid directly. The watch order was canceled, though the jeweler kept a deposit Mark had personally authorized. Dad did not reimburse him. "That's an expensive lesson," Dad said. Mark tried to argue. Dad opened the blue notebook and wrote, "Do not pay Mark for watch mistake." Then he looked up and said, "Now it's recorded." For 2 months, Mark was distant. He sent short texts. He visited Dad only when he could announce it in the sibling group chat. But slowly, something changed. Not dramatically. Mark did not become humble overnight. People rarely rebuild character in one renovation. But he stopped assuming he was in charge. At Dad's July neurology appointment, Mark attended with me. He sat quietly while the doctor explained medication adjustments. When he started to interrupt, Dad raised one finger and said, "Stephanie knows this part." Mark stopped. Afterward, in the parking lot, he said, "I didn't know how much you were tracking." I opened Dad's car door. "You didn't ask." He nodded once. That was all. Allison did better. She came to 2 physical therapy appointments and 1 estate planning follow-up. The first time she saw Dad struggle with a balance exercise, she cried in the hallway. "I thought you exaggerated," she admitted. I said, "I know. I'm sorry." "I know that too." I learned not to make other people's regret my responsibility. That was harder than it sounds. Dad became steadier through the summer. He moved slower, forgot a word now and then, and hated being told to drink water, but he remained himself. On warm evenings, he sat in the garage at his restored workbench, sorting screws into tiny drawers like a man restoring order to the universe. One night in August, I found him there with the blue notebook open. "What are you writing?" I asked. He looked guilty. "Nothing." "Dad." He turned the notebook toward me. He had written, "Stephanie was right. Tell her more often." I looked away because my eyes had filled faster than I wanted. He cleared his throat. "Don't make a thing of it." I laughed softly. "Too late." He tapped the bench. "Your mother always said I trusted you because you argued like her." "I thought you said I argued like a lawyer." "Same thing, in her case." We sat in the garage while crickets started outside and the smell of sawdust rose faintly from the restored wood. "Did I make your life harder?" he asked. The question hurt. "No." "By trusting you with things?" "No, Dad. Your brother and sister think I put too much on you. They think that because it lets them ignore what they didn't carry." He looked at me then. "I should have made them carry more." I did not rush to comfort him. He deserved the dignity of recognizing the truth. "Yes," I said, "you should have." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." Some apologies arrived late but clean. I took his hand. "Thank you." That fall, the family changed shape, not into something perfect. Perfect families are usually just families with better lighting. But truer. At Thanksgiving, Allison brought the medication schedule printed and laminated, then asked me to check it. Mark ordered the meal but sent the invoice to everyone transparently. Dad sat at the head of the table and complained that the turkey was dry, which meant he was feeling strong enough to be himself. Before dinner, he tapped his fork against his water glass. We all froze. He looked at me and smiled slightly. No speeches about money. Everyone laughed nervously. Then he said, "I want to say something about Stephanie." My body tightened out of habit. Dad continued, "For years, she has been the emergency contact for this family in every way that mattered. That is not the same as being difficult. It is work, and I am grateful." The room went quiet. No one rushed to fill it. For once, silence did not feel like avoidance. It felt like respect. After dinner, Mark helped me clear plates. "I don't know how to undo what I said on your porch," he said. I handed him a stack of dessert plates. "You don't undo it, you stop repeating it." He nodded. "I can do that." "Good." Allison came into the kitchen carrying coffee cups. "Can I take Dad to his appointment next Tuesday?" I looked at her. "You already signed up for Thursday." She smiled, a little embarrassed. "I know, I'm adding Tuesday." I let myself smile back. Not because everything was healed. Because effort is still worth noticing when it finally shows up in daylight. Dad's retirement account remained intact. His trust remained clear. The $3 million that Mark thought needed simplifying stayed boring, protected, and exactly where Dad wanted it. Eventually, Dad set up specific education accounts for all the grandchildren, including Allison's children and Mark's daughter, but he did it through his attorney, not through guilt, pressure, or hallway conversations. He also added a clause to his trust. I only know because Elaine Porter called me in to witness the discussion. The clause stated that any beneficiary who attempted to coerce, manipulate, conceal, or misrepresent financial transactions during Harold Grant's lifetime would be subject to review and potential reduction at the trustee's discretion. Dad called it the "Don't Act Stupid" clause. Elaine called it something more formal. I liked Dad's version better. As for me, I changed too. I stopped apologizing for knowing things. I stopped saying, "Sorry, just checking," when I was the only person who had actually checked. I stopped letting my siblings call me intense for reading forms before signing them. I stopped confusing exclusion with evidence that I did not belong. That was the deepest wound, really. Not the party, not the envelope, not even the money. It was the old belief that if my family could remove my name from an invitation, maybe some part of me had never truly earned a place at the table. But Dad's blue notebook reminded me of something important. Some names do not need to be printed on invitations to matter. Some names are written where responsibility lives. In passwords. In emergency contacts. In appointment records. In the note beside a medication list. In the chair next to the person who knows when he is tired. The retirement party became a family story, of course. Families love sanding sharp edges off the truth so they can pass it around safely. People later said there had been a misunderstanding with the guest list. There had not. They said there was confusion around Dad's account. There was not. They said everything worked out. That one was partly true, but not because everyone meant well. It worked out because documents, safeguards, and one stubborn daughter refused to let appearances replace facts. The blue notebook sits on Dad's kitchen table again. The elastic band is looser now. The pages are fuller. Sometimes when I visit, I find new notes. Buy more coffee. Ask Allison about Sophie's recital. Mark did okay today. Stephanie needs vacation. That last one made me roll my eyes, but I did take one. A weekend at a lake cabin 2 hours north, where no one asked me where the insurance card was, or whether Dad could have grapefruit with his medication. I sat on a dock with a paperback and watched the water move under the late afternoon light. For the first time in years, my phone stayed silent for 4 consecutive hours. It felt strange. Then it felt good. When I came back, Dad had left a voicemail. "Steph, hope you're resting. I found the furnace filter without calling you. Do not sound too impressed. I saved it." Now, when I think about Mark on my porch with that unsealed envelope, I do not feel the same sharpness. I still remember the humiliation. I remember the way he said normal, like I was the stain on the family photograph. I remember how easily they removed my name from something I had built. But I also remember the conference room. The blue notebook opening. Dad's voice saying no. The account manager sliding the failed transfer request across the table. The moment my siblings realized that the woman they excluded was the woman their father trusted. I do not think quiet revenge is about making people suffer. I think it is about allowing reality to arrive without dressing it up for the people who depended on your silence. My family uninvited me from Dad's retirement party because they said I embarrassed them. Then they could not access his $3 million account without my signature. And in the end, the most powerful thing I said was not a threat. It was a question. Do you have everything you need? Because sometimes, when people cut you out of the room, they forget you are holding the key to the door they still need opened. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know many women listening have been called difficult, controlling, emotional, or embarrassing, when all they were really doing was keeping someone alive, keeping records straight, or keeping a family from collapsing under its own denial. If this story reached you, I hope you remember that responsibility is not something to be ashamed of. Your steadiness is not the problem. their dependence on it while disrespecting it is. Subscribe to Ultimate Revenge for more stories about quiet women, family betrayal, silent comebacks, and the proof that finally speaks in the room. So tell me, if your family excluded you because your honesty made them uncomfortable, but then needed your signature to get what they wanted, would you help them right away? Or would you let the documents explain who was really trusted?